Well, thank you so much for having me again. You said I'm hosting it, but still, actually, you give me the opportunity here to speak about something that is very dear to my heart and that I've been with a team in the back been driving over the last year and a half or two. So let me actually start sharing my screen because I think at some point you might get tired of just seeing my video. As you said, I want to talk about a guide to event-driven SRE-inspired DevOps. Now, as you said, this is also a mouthful of a lot of different words, and there's even more words in the subline, the end of a monolithic pipeline. I do, however, promise you that this is not going to be I'm just throwing marketing terms on you, but I am going to show you what we have been doing over the last 2 years on our work with Keptn, the CNCF sandbox project that is trying to bring a new approach to both delivery and also operations using an event-driven approach for both disciplines of delivering artifacts, whether these are your microservices, your serverless, or also your traditional applications. So I think one of the uniquenesses is we're not just targeting the cloud native space, even though we were born there, but we have architectured it in a way and put some thoughts in delivery and operational automation for both types of applications, the modern cloud native serverless microservice apps, but also any type of traditional apps. A day, I always say I'm a DevOps activist at Dynatrace, and at night or whenever I have time, I'm a DevRel for Keptn. If you want to know more about me, then you see obviously my link in my Twitter, but the most important thing is that you see the links on the bottom around the Keptn project. So let me also, if you have any questions, I'll try to watch the Q&A or the chat. I think Q&A is a little easier. So if you have questions, put them into Q&A because this helps me to better see, which questions I've already answered. And also feel free to interrupt or like post them in as they come. You don't have to wait until the end because then we can also make this a little more interactive. Cool. Well, then I would say let's get started. So what is Keptn actually? Keptn is, a couple of things, but I believe the best thing is or the best way I can describe it is it's a self-service DevOps control plane. So what does that mean? You, whoever you are, you might be a developer, you might be in operations, you might be an SRE, you might be a performance engineer. What you can do with Keptn is you can pick your use case. Keptn is automating different use cases around progressive delivery is one of those. SLO-based quality gates is another one. And actually the SLO-based quality gates are key to all of the use cases, to be honest with you. There's also SRE automation. SRE automation is all targeted around you have an application or a new service that you want to make sure it is actually reliable. So there Keptn can orchestrate the execution of performance and scalability tests, including running chaos experiments, and then still validate that your system behaves as expected, even under, let's say, rough conditions. And then another use case would be auto remediation, which means if something happens in production, whether this is related to your deployed service, your application, or even to the infrastructure, then Keptn can orchestrate auto remediation tasks for you or complete workflows. So whoever you are, you pick the use case that you want to automate. Then you bring your configuration. You will see that in my examples later on in my live demo that everything is obviously it's declarative. You declare your delivery workflows, you declare your SLIs and SLOs, you declare the workload that you want to simulate, and you declare your runbooks. And the nicest thing I believe from Keptn is not just another tool that can do everything on its own. No, Keptn is really connecting to your tools. It is orchestrating processes and connecting to your tools. So that means you can bring whatever tools you like. If you are deploying microservices, you want to use Helm or you want to use Spinnaker or Argo, go with it. If you have existing Jenkins pipelines that already execute some tests or deploy, do it. If you're using Prometheus for monitoring, great. If you use Dynatrace or any of the other APM vendors, also great. As I said, you can run on Kubernetes, but Keptn itself needs to run on Kubernetes, but the target platform where Keptn should execute these workflows on, they can be anywhere. So pick your use case, bring your configuration, connect your tools, and then Keptn configures or automates the configuration of your monitoring, because we need monitoring data for the quality gates, for the performance evaluation. We need it for figuring out if you're executing auto remediation, if your system is back to a healthy state. It configures your delivery. It understands and configures your reliability tools and also your remediation. And it provides all these use cases, well, whatever use case you pick, as a self-service, which means you can either integrate this into your existing delivery pipeline through an API call. Keptn obviously has an API. You can trigger all these workflows. You can also use Keptn on its own to actually have it as a starting point and then connect to the different tools. You see here some screenshots later on from our UI. Multi-stage delivery, here's one example, and then this heat field is our SLO-based quality gate. And what's also very important, I think this is the key and also the part of my title of the talk, is we are doing this through an event-driven process orchestration engine. So everything Keptn does is event-driven. Everything is declarative. That means you declaratively define your process. We store all the stuff in Git, and you can obviously trigger it through your Git hooks. Everything is centered around SLOs. So every workflow that Keptn provides is always looking at your key service level indicators and your objectives, because everything Keptn does, it also automatically validates if your system at the end is in its desired state. And very importantly, we are connecting to these different tools through open standards. We're using cloud events here, so it's very easy therefore to integrate new tools or to replace tools and to put in new things in your workflow. All right, so why are we doing all of this? Why did we build Keptn? Well, we started building Keptn quite before the latest State of DevOps report came out, but I thought this was actually interesting timing 2 weeks ago, and I know that some of the CDF community have already written reports on it, that 63% of organizations that were surveyed are building internal self-service delivery platforms, which is interesting because we think we want to help here. Why do we want to help, or what do we want to help with? Well, we have realized that Keptn addresses a couple of major problems that people have when adopting these self-service platforms, when they're building these platforms. The thing that Keptn really addresses around delivery is our new approach to delivery is addressing the problem that when you're using traditional delivery platforms, a lot of people are wasting a lot of time. I've actually just watched the previous CDF webinar from CodeFresh, and I think he was the speaker was making a similar claim. So you will see some similarities here. We also focus a lot on automation of manual tasks along delivery, but also manual tasks along auto remediation. And I want to go through all of these and then really go and show you some live demos on how Keptn actually, how it feels and how it works. So the first one, and this is the one that allows me to explain also the architecture, is if you are moving, if you're trying to figure out what's the next gen of internal delivery platform as a self-service, and if you are going towards picking existing tools that we've used maybe for 10, 15, 20 years that work great for the monolithic apps, then you may soon run into bottlenecks and actually spend a lot of time in getting these pipelines up and running or keeping them running. So what does this mean? I just want to show you a quick example. This is a screenshot of one of our pipelines that we have internally. When we basically also moved from deploying our organization, Dynatrace, the one that I've been working for the last 12 years. So we are using traditional delivery pipelines. And the problem with traditional delivery pipelines is that it is mixed information, or it mixes information about the process and the tooling and the target platform. So everything is kind of cobbled and very hard coded together. And yes, I know that tools like Jenkins, and they have done a great job over the years to also, allow you to parameterize everything, to modularize everything. I know that you can use Jenkins to generate Jenkins pipelines to make things a little easier, but still in the end, there's no clear separation of concerns, or you just have to put a lot of effort in it. The other challenge that we have seen as we moved from traditional monolithic apps to more smaller components, microservices, obviously we picked, let's say, Jenkins in our case, as the delivery tool of choice because that's what we knew. So we started off with a Jenkins pipeline that could then deploy our containers. And then the first service was successful. Then we added more services to the project. They made some slight modifications into the initial pipeline. And then this went on and on until we had many different pipelines. And then if something breaks now, it's really hard to figure out why does it break, who made that code change initially, why is this plugin that I need no longer available in that version that I needed because whoever upgraded it to another version, it breaks something. So this is a big challenge. And therefore, what we are promoting is a new way of delivery. It's actually an event-driven approach to delivery. And with this, saving all of these headaches, also allowing you to scale and allowing you to keep an overview of what's actually really going on and really easily identifying in case there is a problem, why there's a problem. So let me explain this to you, what this really what this means. So on the left side, you have your classical delivery. Let's say process, build, prepare, deploy, test. You may add at a later point some notifications with Slack, maybe some rollback mechanisms. So you've built your process over the years. And the problem, as I said earlier, you have all these hard-coded dependencies with your tools. So what we are promoting or proposing is to break these barriers, to basically rip this monolithic construct, rip it apart, use one entity that maintains and manages and orchestrates a clearly defined process. And on the other side, you have different capabilities that can then do a certain thing along that process, whether this is change management, whether this is deploying, whether this is monitoring, testing, JetOps, you can see all of this. So on the left side of the screen, your process definition with your individual process steps. On the right side, your capabilities that can do then one or more of these actions. And in order to connect these, just as we do when we rip monolithic architectures into services, we need something that then triggers the right services at the right time to execute an end-to-end business process. In our case, it's a delivery process, and we're using eventing to then connect them with the tools or the features, the capabilities that can do an individual job. So if whoever orchestrates the process on the left says, hey, I'm executing a process right now and I'm at the deploy stage. So now I'm sending out an event that says I need to deploy container number 1 in dev with the blue-green strategy. It's an event that is sent out. It can be received by one or many tools or services, as I would call them, that can do deployment, but then maybe one tool says, no, I cannot deploy containers, or maybe another one says, I cannot deploy blue-green. But then whatever capability you have enabled can say, yes, I can do blue-green into dev, and I know how to deploy a container. Let me do it. Then it does it, and then it sends back the result in the end. So this is really what it means to have an event-driven approach to delivery, a workflow, a process on the left, capabilities on the right, and then whoever orchestrates the process sends the right events at the right time that are then handled by these tools. So really, in the end, to sum it up, process definition, tool definition. And this is exactly what we have done with Keptn. This is exactly what drove the architecture and the implementation of Keptn. So what is Keptn? Besides its funny name, you may say, right? Keptn is the German phonetic for a captain that is able to ship your containers or your applications safe from development into the safe harbor of production. Keptn, when you install it, it's a container-based solution. So it's a service-oriented architecture that is using eventing. Obviously, when you install it on Kubernetes, that's our target platform to install Keptn itself. You get the control plane, which is the central logic unit that is orchestrating processes for delivery and also for auto remediation, so for operational tasks. Then whoever team is interested in actually using Keptn for either delivery, for quality gates, for performance engineering, for SRE engineering, or for auto remediation in production, you have to specify the use case and you declare the workflow that should be executed. There's two examples here. The one, the shipyard, this is for the defining delivery. So here you can see dev, staging, and prod, where you also specify direct deployment in dev, blue, green in staging, canary in production, what type of testing should happen, what type of SLOs or SLAs you have. And then on the right side, top right, remediation. This would be for, hey, in case our monitoring tool detects a high failure rate or maybe a full disk on our infrastructure in production, then I want to first clean that directory, maybe also adjust the log level. So you specify which action should be taken. So you declare what should happen. And then the who does it is something that the execution plane is then acting upon. So we call it the uniform of Keptn that specifies what type of capabilities, what type of tools you're connecting to Keptn. This could be, let's say, Git for configuration service, Helm for deployment. You can see a couple of names on the bottom here for the different types of tools. The nice thing about this separation is on the one side, you specify your process, and on the other side, you specify the tools. You can have multiple tools that can do a similar thing, so they can all subscribe to the same event, and then basically decide when a process is executed, who is then actually taking the action. The nice thing with this is also you can change the process without having to worry about which tools are currently integrated in this process, because this happens decoupled through events. You can also switch tools without having to worry about updating all of your pipelines where the current tool is used. So if you're switching, let's say, from Helm to Spinnaker, from Jenkins to Argo, if you're switching from Prometheus to Dynatrace, or I don't know, from JMeter to Neotis here from a testing perspective, you just change the tooling configuration and that's it. Hopefully this makes sense, because if it makes sense, then the next thing will also make sense. The beneficiary is whoever then triggers these workflows in Keptn. And I want to show you the delivery workflow. So if I have a developer here that says, I have a new artifact, please Keptn, you go and do continuous delivery, then Keptn will orchestrate the execution of that process that is specified. And then with this, it sends, as you can see here, different events that are then picked up by different tools. And with this, the process gets executed. In this case, in the end, it's moving an artifact from left to right over multiple stages and so on and so forth. So I hope this makes sense. By the way, I know some people may have joined late. If you have any questions, put them into the Q&A feature. I have them here on the left side. Feel free to interrupt me, ask me questions at any time. My goal is really to also learn from you, get your feedback and see if the stuff that we have built actually makes sense and actually solves problems, or what else you are requiring for this to maybe consider as a tool that you want to use in your organization. So this is the architecture. Now let me go into a demo. The demo that I have is a 3-stage pipeline, and I want to really show you how this works. And instead of just playing out the animation here, I just go into my tool. So what I have here, Keptn is Git-based, as I told you. Or what that means is Keptn is always storing all of its configuration in Git. Everything starts from a delivery perspective with a shipyard file. So this is the shipyard file that I mentioned earlier. Let me zoom in here. It's a little maybe small, but now it should be a little bigger. So initially when I created a Keptn project, so Keptn is organized in projects. And then if you say I have a new project, and in my case, this is called the Keptn 07 Simple Node project, I specify which stages I have. I have 3 stages. And in every stage, I can specify what should happen in this stage. This is really, I define and declare the process. What type of deployment strategy should happen? What type of test strategy? Approval strategy, you can also specify as Keptn orchestrates the process and pushes an artifact from one stage to the next. It is always deploying, then it's running tests, and then it's evaluating its SLOs. And the evaluation always results in either pass, warning, or fail. And therefore, you can also specify what's the approval strategy into staging when something, for instance, comes out of dev. Do you want to automatically deploy everything that is passed? Or like what I said in production, whether it's passed or warning, I always want to have a human to then click maybe on a button or make the call. But you can also decide here to automatically continue the process into the next stage. You also see here deployment strategy blue-green, or have an automated remediation strategy in production, which means when something is deployed in production, blue-green, and some problem happens, Keptn is able to also revert, or can execute any type of remediation workflow that you've specified based on the problem that comes in. Because maybe the problem is not related with your blue-green deployment, but maybe with an infrastructure issue, and then Keptn can make sure to execute tasks that solve this issue. So this is the initial shipyard file. So what I have done, I have created a Keptn project. So initially, obviously, I had to install Keptn. In my case, Keptn runs on an EKS. And I have a couple of projects here already, as you can see, onboarded. The one that I want to focus on today is the Keptn 07 project. If I click on environment, I see my 3 stages. I see dev, I see staging, and I see prod. If I click on dev, I also see what was the last thing that was deployed. Build number 3 at 1851. This was just shortly before I started the webinar. I also get the link here. You can see here, this is not a very exciting app. It's a Node.js app that gets deployed through Helm. I'm using the built-in Helm capabilities of Keptn to deploy it into my Kubernetes cluster. In staging, let's click on this link here. I have build number 3 in staging, and in production, there's build number 3 in production. Exactly. So now what I want to do, let's see what else is here. This was actually from a previous round of build number 4 that was kind of rolled back because I've been playing around a little bit with different builds, and you can already see a little preview of what I wanted to show you later on. But what's interesting here, right, if you look at this, I showed you the environment screen that shows me the 3 stages. On the service screen, I can see for every microservice that I've onboarded, which processes did I actually start. So which processes were executed, triggered by a pull request, triggered by a CLI comment, triggered by an API call to Keptn. And this is the build number 3 that I kicked off 10 minutes before the start of the session. Now, I want to make sure, actually build number 3 goes into production here. Let me kick off another process. So build number 3 is in prod, but now I want to kick off build number 4. The way this works, so one of the options is I can use the CLI. As you can see here, I can say Keptn. Let me actually kick it off and then explain it. So Keptn is event-based, meaning every process that you want to execute, you also need to trigger Keptn and say, now it's time for you to trigger a particular process in a particular project. And then you can give it some information about what this process should be and some context. In this case, I'm saying Keptn, for the Keptn 07 project, I have this particular service, simple node, and I have a new artifact, which Keptn then knows, if there's a new artifact, it will trigger the delivery workflow. If this would be a problem event that I sent in, it would then execute the remediation workflow. If I would just say, Keptn, please evaluate this, there's an evaluation event, Keptn would just trigger the quality gate evaluation. So depending on the event that you send in, which we call the root event or the trigger event of a process, Keptn then executes the process that you've specified in a project. And now it is actually kicking off the process, which means build number 4, which I've just specified, should now be kind of sent along the way. So let's go back to the URL, to the UI. We call this the Keptn's bridge, by the way. So now I can see at 1924, that's my local time, Keptn already started initially processing that configuration change event. What actually happens with this is also very interesting. I said, let's go from build number 3 to build number 4. I've decided to use Helm. Initially, I also uploaded some Helm charts. And if you do that, then what Keptn also does, right? Remember that I had this here. I had my Git repo. For every stage, Keptn also has automatically creates branches, dev, prod, and staging. If I now go to the dev branch, then I can see here a simple node. Here's my Helm charts. And as you can see here, 2 minutes ago, my Helm charts were actually automatically updated to version number 4. Because Keptn, I sent an event to Keptn saying I want to go to version number 4. The first thing that Keptn did is it sent out an event to trigger a configuration change in the Git repo. In my case, I'm using Git, right? Could also be maybe some other version control system that you have. I've also synced it or uplinked it with my GitHub project here, so I can see it. And then once this is done, then Keptn continues with the process and say, hey, configuration changes have been applied to Git. Now it's time to do the actual deployment. And in my case, this is done by Helm. I have a Helm service. Could also be an Argo, could be a Jenkins pipeline, could be an Azure DevOps pipeline, a GitLab pipeline, depending on what, remember, whatever tool capability, whatever capability you enable and listen to a certain event, which Keptn sends to a trigger action, that tool then goes in and does its job. And in my case, it was Helm. So now in dev, I should have build number 4 That means if I go back to my dev page from earlier, where I initially loaded it with build number 3, if I refresh this now I have build number 4 deployed. The next thing that will happen, tests will be executed. Now, which tests will be executed? In my case, I decided to use JMeter, so I enabled the JMeter subscription. And what does JMeter do when we kick off JMeter? Just as any tool that participates in a Keptn workflow, you can upload the tool-specific configuration files to the respective branch in the GitHub repo. So in my case, I have my load JMX here, my JMeter configuration, and this is the stuff that then my testing tool will pull out. And then the same goes true for other tools that participate in the workflow. So hopefully this makes sense. Again, as a reminder, if you have any questions, let me know. Let me just quickly go back to build number 3. And let me show you how build number 3 kind of went on. So there was dev, deployment, test finished. In dev, I didn't have specified any additional SLAs, so you can specify SLIs and SLOs. The only thing that I've specified is just take the result of my JMeter test. So whenever a tool is triggered and it sends back its result, it basically sends back an event. You have full access to that event. That's a cloud native event. And then it goes on, right? So there's a question that just comes in from Florian. When there are multiple consumers for a given event, is the execution order well defined? Good question. So in the current version that I'm showing you, this is 0.7.3. The order is not well defined. That means Keptn sends out an event, and then tools that want to participate, they do their stuff. And when they are finished and they want to tell Keptn that they are finished, they send back basically an event that says, hey, tester executed. But Florian, what the team is currently working on, 0.8, which should go into preview in December, so soon. We are integrating or introducing start and stop events. So the idea then is with 0.8, every tool that is receiving an event and says, I want to do something, has to send a start event to basically say, hey, I'm going to start. So we actually, first of all, know if there is, if we have to wait for certain tools to complete their job, right? Because right now with the current version, we don't have this. The second thing is with 0.8, you're much more flexible to define how your workflows should look like. Because if you remember what I've shown you in the beginning, this is kind of my shipyard file, which actually means we have a very opinionated way of which events are sent. There's always a configuration change, then a deployment, then a test, and then an evaluation. So there's no flexibility. With 0.8, we changed this, which means you can actually specify exactly what type of events should happen, and you can add additional ones, and you can then also say, which tool should then basically, or which capability should be triggered in which sequence. So we give you this flexibility with 0.8. And Florian, let me know if this answers your question. Coming back to build number 3, I just want to go down, right? Eventually we'll go into staging. I have specified automated approval. This is why this went through. Configuration change again, deployment, tests were executed. And then this is more interesting now. A core to Dynatrace, to Keptn, is that after every deployment or after every test and also after every remediation, it basically says, let's evaluate the system. So it sends out an event and says, I need to evaluate the SLIs and SLOs. And I go into more detail to this in a little bit, but I want to at least show you how this looks like in my scenario here for delivery. There's multiple lines here. Every line represents a metric, a service level indicator. Keptn is retrieving these values from your monitoring tool. It could be Prometheus, it could be Dynatrace, it could be any other monitoring tool or any other data source. And then it is retrieving that value. In my case, right, it is retrieved by Dynatrace. So Dynatrace sends back the raw data for every metric. But then what the uniqueness of Keptn is, Keptn has a component that is called the lighthouse. And the lighthouse is then taking these individual values and comparing it against your SLOs, which you can also specify in a file. So I can specify my individual SLOs, my criteria, my pass and warning criteria for every metric. Keptn analyzes it. This is why you see green, yellow, and red. And it then also calculates an overall score, which is then gets normalized between 0 and 100. So in this case, I actually got a score of 92. If I zoom in a little bigger here, right? I got a score of 92, which means pass. I get to see all the individual results and which one has kind of violated. You can compare with a static threshold, or you can also compare with the previous build. There's multiple options, and based on that grading or score, Keptn then decides whether to continue or stop that process. We also give you options here to look at the individual raw data that comes in, right? So build of a build, you can see trends and so on and so forth. And if everything is good, then it continues into the next stage. So let's see where build number 4 is right now. Build number 4 made it through into staging now, which is great. That means in staging, I can refresh. Now we have build number 4 here. Tests should execute now. These tests run a little longer, so we'll revisit this. But hopefully, this explains it now a little bit what Keptn in general does. It's an event-driven orchestrator. It orchestrates processes, uses events, and with this interacts with different tools. All the resource files are put into Git, where every stage has its own branch, where every single tool then has the terminology or the specification is that every tool has its own subfolder, like JMeter files, Helm charts, and my Dynatrace configuration files. That would be Prometheus subfolder for Prometheus, and so on and so forth. Here are also my SLOs, right? Because this is global to the service with all of these configuration elements. Cool. All right. So this is my kind of first part where, and I just showed you all of this, right? This is just my my typically the demo that I've just done, but visualized and highlighted in a way in case, let's say, my demo would not work for whatever reason. Good. Then let me go to oh yeah, another thing. Not only do I obviously have the demo, and you can obviously do this yourself, you can go through our tutorials. We also have users that have done this. For instance, a very common use case is that you use your existing CI tools that build your containers and push them to the registry, like Patrick is doing. They're using GitLab CI. So, and then once the container image is built and pushed, then they trigger Keptn for delivery. All right. So integratable through the API. So let me just show you this quickly. I showed you the bridge here, which is the UI, but then you also have a Keptn API where you can then send any type of event. You have full access to the configuration system, meaning you can create services, you can create projects, you can upload resources. So you can basically interact with the config repo behind the scenes. A very common use case is actually, so Keptn holds its own config repo, but if you have your repos where you have your source code, your tests already, then a very common use case with a lot of our users is you keep all the stuff there, and when your CI is done and then triggers Keptn, you basically just upload the recent files from your source repo to the Keptn repo, and then just pull it over or push it over and then trigger Keptn. That would be a way to keep everything together in one place, one option. All right, good. Now, could you implement canary analysis using the SLI evaluation? Yes, Florian, and I think let me just, I think this is now what I'm getting to in my next section. So the a separate use case, but you have already seen it as part of delivery, is really the automation of deployment validation. So what do I mean with this? A lot of organizations are, and maybe you as well, you're using some type of automation in CI/CD that builds, deploys, runs your tests, but then there's typically a phase where you have somebody manually looking at the data. Like Florian, you were just asking, how about canary analysis? So whether this is looking at the functional test results and then trying to figure out if this Selenium test fails, is this really a problem? Is this a key critical feature? Or if you're running performance tests and let's say your response time stays great, but all of a sudden you have 50% more memory consumption, you see 5% more pods or 10% more pods on Kubernetes to deliver the same response time. Is this still good, yes or no? Or if you add monitoring data, there's so much data. So what does this tell me? And this typically means more data to look at, the longer it takes if you do it manually. And therefore, we are bringing in an automated approach based on SLIs and SLOs, and we call it SLI and SLO-based quality gates. So what that means, we didn't come up with any new concepts, to be honest. I also don't think that Google came up with a brand new thing. I think they just did a great job in coming up with some great terms and then really showing their practices to the world. So in case you've never heard about the SRE practices from Google, what they basically say, we're looking at service level indicators. We call them so SLIs. It's basically something that is measurable, like the error rate of your login transactions. Then you specify your objectives. So what is the success criteria of that metric? So for instance, login error rate must be less than 2% over a 30-day period once it runs in production. That's a clear objective of success. And then what's an SLA, you may wonder? SLAs is kind of what happens if we miss our SLOs. There's typically then for some SLOs, maybe a business agreement, a legal contract, or maybe you are losing users, right? If you are on if you're e-commerce shop, for instance, and your page gets slower and people cannot log in or check out. So it's something very simple. SLIs metrics, SLO your objectives, and SLAs, what happens if we miss our objectives. Again, Google did a great job here in explaining this, great video material out there. So check it out, really great. So now why do I bring this up? Because we see more and more organizations are using SLIs and SLOs for production monitoring. So that means they actually know what is the success criteria for a particular service over a particular time frame. And this could be the classical metrics like throughput, error rate, response time. Could also be something like conversion rate, user experience, number of shopping carts in a purchase, I don't know, whatever it is, right? But we say, well, this is great if organizations already start thinking about what's important, but why not do it earlier? Why only do it in production? So this is why our approach is use the same concept, the same terminology, and shift left, meaning take your metrics, your SLIs that are important, tell us what you expect, and then let Keptn pull out these metrics for you after every build and then compare it against your objectives. But then the additional thing we do is not only against, let's say, has to be faster than 100 milliseconds, we also allow you to compare it to your previous evaluations to see, was there any regression? I think, Florian, this is to your point. We can do this also with canaries in production. So we can actually pull out data from one canary and then compare it with your baseline or with the previous builds. But the concept is very simple, right? We didn't reinvent the wheel. It's not rocket science. The way it's implemented, I think, is still unique. Because remember, Keptn is an event-driven system. That means you can really plug in any type of monitoring data source or any type of data source. Because Keptn, when you ask Keptn to evaluate a quality gate, it basically sends out an event and says, hey, I need this data from you. Now, what is this data? As a user of Keptn, you upload or you specify in a YAML file what are your SLIs, and these are done by data provider. So there's an SLI file for Prometheus, one for Dynatrace, one for Neotis, one for whatever other tool you have, and it specifies an indicator name like error rate, and next to it a tool-specific, let's say, query language. Then you specify SLOs. This is now independent of the monitoring tool. This is something the Lighthouse does, where you can specify your pass and your warning criteria. And you also specify a total score, because what Keptn does, if you ask Keptn, please evaluate a quality gate for me for a particular time frame. So this is actually the Keptn CLI that shows you how you would just execute this piece of the process, not the whole delivery, but maybe just the quality gate. So that's why you can also integrate this into your existing pipelines. So then Keptn sends an event and say, I need the quality gate, I need the SLIs, and then all the tools that want to participate send back the results. And once that is done, Keptn analyzes it, compares it against the SLOs, grades every metric, gives it either 1 point if it's good, if it's passed, half a point if it's warning, and 0 points if it fails. but you can also change weights. So that's the default weight of 1, but you can also say a certain metric is more important, and you can also specify key metrics. So you can say number of database calls is the most important metric, or response time, and if this fails, the rest should fail. But in the end, what Keptn does, it returns a total score between 0 and 100%. And one way we did it, so we have it available for Prometheus, for Neotus. As I said, during the day I work at Dynatrace, so I want to quickly just show you how we did this with Dynatrace. You just build a dashboard, put all of your metrics on it that you would normally manually look at, but then Keptn is pulling these metrics fully automatically and then calculates that score. So that means if I go back to my example here, by the way, build number 4 now made it all the way through. Remember, build number 4 made it in staging, the evaluation was done, and now it's actually waiting for me to approve it. It achieved 88 points, which is warning, but now I could actually send it off to production. But let me first show you the quality gates here. So really what happens is that Keptn basically automated this process. Me normally looking at a dashboard with a bunch of key metrics from my infrastructure, from my services, from my transactions, whatever, you can put whatever you want on it. And then you specify, if I zoom in here a little bit, on every tile, what is your pass and warning criteria. You can also specify different weights, as you can see here. You can make individual metrics a key transaction. And then you can also specify overall pass and warning criteria, and also how you want to compare builds. If you want to compare just with one previous build, with multiple previous builds, what type of compare function. So you can really go crazy here. But this is basically where my data comes from. Keptn pulls it in, evaluates it, and now tells me this would be ready to go. I can also go to the environment view. Remember here, dev, staging, and prod. So in prod, we have build number 3 right now. Remember, I think this is still the case. If I refresh, yes. But now, because my quality gate ran through, I can also see it here with the results. I can now say, yes, go off and deploy it. And now the process continues because Keptn continues sending out these events. So the great thing about this is, I believe, right, this quality gate is very, or this SLO-based approach is ingrained in Keptn and everything Keptn does, part of delivery, but you can also execute it standalone. Standalone, here's an example. I have a different project that is called Quality Gate, and I typically just use this from a Jenkins pipeline. All right, so here you can see that this process was actually triggered by Jenkins. I had a Jenkins build that was deploying something and then running a test. And then when whichever tool triggers a Keptn process can also send metadata, like it was build 123, it was this Jenkins job. Here's the URL back to my Jenkins. And then you see here, this process is very small compared to the other one because it's just retrieving the metrics. And then it's giving me a result. So that's also, you can use this. You see, every time a build was executed, or a quality gate, and if I go back, then obviously here we see for delivery in every stage what was the final result of the quality gate. We also see it here, and yeah, now this is going on. Configuration is changed, and now the deployment should happen in a second, and that should hopefully then make it into production. That's been deployed now. That means now in prod, build number 4 is in prod. Now, Florian, again, to your question, I'm doing a blue-green deployment here. This is what I specified in my shipyard. That means my Helm service is actually, when I initially onboarded it, created a canary deployment with a virtual service using Istio. So it's now deploying prod. It's now observing how it's doing, and then calls a quality gate evaluation, and based on that result, it's either switching back or keeping it in. Now, build number 4 has some built-in problems. That means I am actually expecting it to roll back. But this is also to your question, can we use this for evaluation of blue-greens or canaries? Yes, absolutely. And I've also had people asking me, how does this work with tools like Argo or Spinnaker? Can you also use this? Of course, you can use Argo for the deployment and then use the Keptn quality gate for evaluation of your deployment and then make decisions. You can also use Spinnaker, and then I think Spinnaker has a judge system, so you can actually use Keptn as a judge. Any experience running Keptn on OpenShift? Just asking for a friend, of course. Yes, Keptn also works on OpenShift. That means if you have a look at our Keptn SH, and if you go to our docs, and then there is the install, and I think under the install, you should have all of the instructions here, right, on how to run it. We tried to do a good job with keeping the documentation up to date. Another cool thing is the tutorials. There's also a complete tutorials page here, and there's also instructions on OpenShift. So you can tell your friend that this works. All right, so let me cover the last topic. Oh yeah, another example actually for the quality gates. Remember, a cool use case is you're using GitLab, for instance, for your whatever you have for deploy test, and then it's very easy to just integrate Keptn quality gate. So this is why we give you, I know Keptn can do a lot, but essentially what it does, it orchestrates processes around delivery and operation automation. And the nice thing is you can also pick out an individual piece of this process and then integrate it into your existing tools that may already own the end-to-end process. Or you can flip it around and you can say Keptn should own the end-to-end process and then call and trigger the individual tools that do an individual job pretty well. And you can stick with the tools that you like. And with Keptn, slowly kind of automate more and more things. All right, last section. By the way, if people have questions, please use the Q&A feature. The last one, I just quickly glance over it. We have also built Keptn for automating operational tasks because we've seen a lot of organizations spending a lot of time in manual troubleshooting and remediation of problems in production. To solve this, we also just apply the same event-driven or SRE-driven remediation workflow, which means you can use Keptn and let your monitoring tool or whoever in your infrastructure, whatever tool is detecting a problem, send this problem to Keptn. Like in my case, conversion rate dropped, root cause CPU pressure. What you can then specify in Keptn, besides the shipyard that I showed you earlier for delivery, you can also specify a so-called remediation workflow for auto remediation. It looks something like this, where you say, for a particular problem, I want to execute this action and then another action. So what Keptn does, it says, all right, I have a remediation workflow for this particular problem. First action is scale up. So remember what Keptn does, it sends an event and whatever tool you have plugged in can then execute that action. Now Keptn doesn't do fire and forget, it always then evaluates. So we're using the same evaluation concept where then Keptn sends an event to your monitoring tools and say, hey, first of all, I'm interested. Do you still see the problem open? So if your monitoring tool keeps track of problem status, it will always ask it. But then additionally, it says any other additional SLIs and SLOs we want to validate. If it's good, great. If not, it continues the workflow and triggers the next action, then reevaluates and hopefully everything is good. If not, the last step might be escalate. It could be an escalation step. Right? So this is great. I think a lot of people would love this, but then a lot of people fear that this is really dangerous if we do this fully automatically in production. And then I say, yes, it might be dangerous, but I think what the real thing here is this is code that runs in production. And I think every code that ends up in production should be tested. And this is why I really like the integration that we have with tools like Litmus Chaos Engineering or Gremlin or Chaos Monkey, because you can actually do test-driven operations now. Because the idea is if you, in a pre-prod environment, can, let's say, execute some loads to simulate some production traffic and then enforce chaos, the first thing you can do, you can validate that your monitoring and alerting works correctly. And then if you send it to Keptn, then with Keptn, you can actually then start defining and refining your workflows, your remediation workflows, and actually figure out in a pre-prod, in a safe kind of test environment, does my remediation process and all the code that sits in these actions actually work or not? So this is really test-driven operations so that when you really deploy something, a new version into production and also this configuration, you know you have at least tested it already. And I think that's important, and keep this in mind. So Keptn also supports the remediation workflows. Okay, so let's wrap it up. What is Keptn? If you've been here from the beginning, then I told you that you can pick different use cases. You can bring your configuration for each use case, and you can connect your own tools, and then Keptn automates the configuration of the tools and the orchestration and provides these use cases for you as a self-service. We are using as much declaration as possible, obviously, as you saw, where the processes and configuration, everything is stored in Git. SLOs are centerpiece to whatever we do. We always validate that every action we take is still making sure your systems operate under your success criteria and everything is based on standards. Why we built it? If you remember the first slide that I had, we know that a lot of you out there are trying to find out what is the next delivery, the next automation, the next thing that allows you to become faster in deploying software, whether this is on cloud native or let's say more enterprise traditional software. We want to help you to automate these processes, and I think we have at least an answer for that. You can get started with our tutorials that I've shown you earlier, but there's also a lot of more content and also a Slack channel that you can see here on that slide. And I've used up almost all of the hour, but I still have a couple of minutes left. So I want to say first, thanks for CDF to give me that space to talk about Keptn, the event-driven approach. I want to say thank you to Johannes and Florian for the questions that you already had. And if there's anybody else that has questions, then please just use the question feature in Zoom and just type it in.
Did you already answer them? The ones that are in the Q&A section, Andy?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Never mind. I see them
and I'm just marking them as answered. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, everyone. We've got 5 more minutes. If you've got some additional questions, take advantage.
It would also be, interesting to know. Typically, what I would be interested in is which tools in your DevOps tool chain do you already have, and what type of where would you see Keptn fit, for instance, right? Would it be the quality gate use case that you integrate, let's say, with Jenkins or GitLab or whatever you have, or would you see that you have a project where Keptn could then orchestrate the complete delivery process? So would also be great to learn from you. So feel free not only to ask questions, but also give me some feedback. And as you have my personal details here, always feel free to follow up also on social media. And with my name, it should be easy to guess what my email is. It's my first name dot last name at thecompany.I-work-for.com. So that should also be fairly easy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andy. Appreciate your time as always. Yeah. Thank you for coming on and teaching us about Keptn.
Yeah, and there's actually one question I quickly wanna answer. Is an event-driven approach mutually exclusive to GitOps, or can they be used in conjunction? I think it's perfect in conjunction, not mutually exclusive at all, because with GitOps you are storing and changing your configuration files, and then based on that change, you have a system that is making sure that this change actually gets applied to your infrastructure, to your applications, and that's what Keptn is doing, right? Keptn is using the information in Git, whether this is your test files, whether this is your Helm charts. So whenever they change, then these changes can trigger Keptn to then make sure that all of the right tools are getting triggered to then make sure that what you want, what you declared in Git, is actually applied. And I think that's why it's not mutually exclusive. I think it's a perfect match. And that's and I think Bruno is asking, is this recording going to be made available later? I believe so, right? It's going to be on YouTube.
Yes, let me actually drop our YouTube playlist, but yes, we have a YouTube playlist in the CD Foundation channel, and all of our webinars can be found there. Cool. 1 second.
And whoever asked the mutually exclusive question, hopefully this also answered your question. Let me know. Yeah, and thanks for sending the playlist in the chat.
There it
That's
is.
great. Cool.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This wraps episode 12 of our webinar series for 2020.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great holiday season.
Yeah, stay safe and healthy.
Absolutely.